The doctor's words hung in the air like vultures circling carrion, and Delilah Owens felt her entire world collapse into the dirt floor of that cramped medical tent in Fort Bowie, Arizona. It was May 1878, and the brutal desert sun beat down on the canvas above, as Doctor Henshaw wiped his spectacles clean and repeated what he had just said, as if saying it twice would somehow make the cruelty of it more bearable. She was too weak, he insisted, her constitution too fragile after the fever that had nearly claimed her life 3 months prior. Bearing a child would kill her, he said with the cold certainty of a man who had seen too much death and believed himself an authority on it. Delilah was only 22 years old, and in that moment she felt ancient and hollow, carved out like the dried riverbeds that scarred the Arizona landscape. She stumbled from the medical tent into the glaring afternoon light, her calico dress clinging to her thin frame. The fort bustled around her with the usual chaos of military life on the frontier. Soldiers drilled in formation, their boots raising clouds of dust. Horses whinnied from the stables. A blacksmith's hammer rang out its rhythmic song. But Delilah heard none of it. She walked without direction, her mind replaying every dream she had nurtured since childhood, every hope of rocking a baby to sleep, of teaching small hands to knead bread, of watching a child run through fields of desert wildflowers. All of it gone, dust and ashes. She found herself at the edge of the fort, where the wooden palisade gave way to endless stretches of copper-colored earth and distant purple mountains. Her hands gripped the rough timber, and she let the splinters bite into her palms, welcoming any pain that might distract from the ache in her chest. Tears came then, hot and furious, tracking through the dust on her cheeks. "Miss Owens." The voice was deep and gentle, and Delilah hastily wiped at her face before turning. She knew who it was before she saw him. Vincent Irving had been stationed at Fort Bowie for 8 months, a civilian scout who worked with the cavalry to navigate the treacherous terrain and maintain peace with the Apache bands that moved through the territory. He was 26, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin, and eyes the color of whiskey held up to lamplight. His dark hair needed cutting, falling past his collar, and he wore the practical clothes of a man who lived more in the saddle than in town. Worn leather vest, faded shirt, chaps that had seen better days. There was a kindness in his face that had always made Delilah feel safe, though they had spoken only a handful of times. "I am fine," she lied, turning back to the desert. Vincent moved to stand beside her, not touching, just present. He removed his hat and held it in his hands, turning it slowly. "I have never been much good at pretending not to see when someone is hurting," he said quietly. "But I will leave you be if that is what you want." Something in his voice, the genuine offer to simply go away without offense, made Delilah's composure crumble again. A sob escaped her throat before she could stop it, and then she was crying in earnest, one hand pressed to her mouth as if she could stuff the grief back inside. Vincent did not flee from her tears the way so many men would have. Instead, he stood steady as a cottonwood tree in a storm, and when her knees began to buckle, his strong arm came around her shoulders, holding her upright. "I have got you," he said simply. "Whatever it is, you are not alone in it." They stood like that for a long while, Vincent supporting her weight as if it were nothing, his presence solid and warm against the vastness of the desert. When Delilah finally regained control of herself, she pulled away, embarrassed by her outburst. But Vincent's expression held no judgment, only concern that seemed to reach right into her chest and squeeze her heart. "The doctor says I cannot have children," she heard herself confess, the words tumbling out before she could consider whether she should share such intimate information with a man she barely knew. He says I am too weak. That pregnancy would kill me." Vincent's jaw tightened, and something fierce flashed in those amber eyes. Dr. Henshaw is a fool who thinks his medical books know more than the human spirit. He examined me. He knows my condition. He knows your body recovered from a fever. He does not know your strength. Vincent placed his hat back on his head and turned to face her fully. "I have seen you, Miss Owens. I have watched you tend to the soldiers when they come back injured from patrol. I have seen you help the laundresses haul water in the heat of the day. I have seen you gentle a spooked horse with nothing but your voice and your steady hands. That is not weakness." Delilah shook her head, though his words warmed something inside her that had gone cold in that medical tent. "Having strength of character does not change what my body can endure." "Maybe not alone," Vincent said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. His gaze was steady, intense in a way that made her breath catch. "But what if you were not alone? What if someone strong enough stood beside you, carried what you could not, gave you their strength when yours faltered?" "I do not understand," she whispered. Vincent took a step closer, and Delilah could smell leather and sage and something uniquely him. "I am saying that if Dr. Henshaw believes you too weak to be a mother, then I will be strong enough for 3. For you, for me, and for any child we might bring into this world together." The audacity of it stole her breath. They had barely spoken more than pleasantries, and here he stood offering her everything she thought she had lost. "You do not even know me," she managed. "Then let me," Vincent said. "I have watched you for months, Delilah. I have wanted to speak with you properly, to court you the right way. But I am not a man of pretty words or social graces. I am direct and I am honest, and what I know is this. You are the strongest woman I have ever encountered, and if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my days proving to you that Dr. Henshaw was wrong about every single word he said." Delilah felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. This could not be real. Men did not offer such things to women they barely knew, especially not when those women came with the burden of potential tragedy. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking on the single syllable. "Why would you tie yourself to someone who might die trying to give you a family?" "Because I would rather have one day of Chinese letter with you than a lifetime of safety with someone else," Vincent said, and the raw honesty in his voice left no room for doubt. "And because I believe you are meant for more than what that doctor told you today. I believe you are meant to live, Delilah Owens, fully and completely. If you will let me, I want to be part of that life." The desert wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of creosote and dust. Delilah looked into Vincent's eyes and saw no pity there, no patronizing certainty that he knew what was best. Instead, she saw partnership. She saw possibility. She saw a man willing to walk into uncertainty because he believed she was worth the risk. "I do not know if I can give you children," she said carefully, needing him to understand the full weight of what he was offering. "And if I try, it might kill me. Then we will not try until you are ready, and if you are never ready, then we will build a different kind of family. There are children in this world who need love, who need a home. There are 1,000 ways to be a mother beyond carrying a child in your womb." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but sure. "I am not offering you this because I want children, Delilah. I am offering because I want you. Everything else, we will figure out together." Delilah felt tears sliding down her cheeks again, but these were different from the ones she had shed moments before. These carried hope instead of despair. "You really mean it," she said wonderingly. "You truly mean every word." "Every single one," Vincent confirmed. "So what do you say, Miss Owens? Will you let me court you properly? Will you give me the chance to show you that strength is not something you have to carry alone?" She thought of the life she had imagined crumbling to dust in that medical tent. She thought of Vincent's steady presence, his unwavering belief in her resilience. She thought of how rare it was to find someone who looked at your weakness and offered to share the burden rather than walk away from it. And she thought of how desperately she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for happiness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will let you court me." The smile that broke across Vincent's face was like sunrise over the desert, transforming his features from handsome to breathtaking. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Then I am the luckiest man in all of Arizona Territory," he said. Over the following weeks, Vincent proved himself to be a man of his word. He courted Delilah with a patience and attentiveness that left her breathless. He brought her wildflowers he found on his scouting expeditions, varieties she had never seen before with names like desert marigold and lupine. He taught her to read the desert the way he did, showing her which plants held water, which tracks belonged to deer and which to coyotes, how the color of the sky could tell you when a storm was coming hours before the first clouds appeared. They walked together in the evenings when the brutal heat began to fade, talking about everything and nothing. Delilah learned that Vincent had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had died of cholera when he was 16, and he had drifted west, learning to scout from an old mountain man named Jeremiah, who had taken pity on a grief-stricken boy. Vincent spoke fluent Spanish and passable Apache, and he genuinely respected the native peoples in a way that was rare among white men on the frontier. Delilah, in turn, told him about her childhood in Missouri, how her parents had died in a fire when she was 18, how her older brother had brought her west to Arizona Territory, hoping the dry climate would be better for his wife's consumption. It had not worked. Her sister-in-law had died anyway, and her brother had drunk himself to death within a year, unable to bear the loss. Delilah had been alone at Fort Bowie for 2 years, supporting herself by taking in sewing and mending for the soldiers, existing but not really living until the fever had struck, and nearly finished what grief had started. "We are both orphans, then," Vincent said one evening as they sat on a bench outside the fort's chapel, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Both of us know what it is to lose everything." "Yes," Delilah agreed softly. "But perhaps that means we also know how precious it is to find something worth holding on to." Vincent turned to her, his eyes reflecting starlight. "You are worth holding on to, Delilah. I want you to know that, not for what you can give me, but for who you are." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "I am beginning to believe you," she whispered. As summer deepened, and the temperature soared past 100 degrees day after day, their courtship deepened as well. Vincent was always respectful, never pushing for more than Delilah was ready to give, but the attraction between them grew impossible to ignore. There were moments when their hands would brush and linger, when their eyes would meet and hold for several heartbeats too long, when Delilah would feel the heat of Vincent's gaze on her lips and wonder what it would be like to kiss him. The wondering ended one evening in early July. Vincent had taken Delilah riding out to a hidden canyon he knew, a place where a spring fed a small pool surrounded by cottonwood trees. It was cooler there, shaded and peaceful, the sound of trickling water like music in the desert silence. They had dismounted and were standing by the pool, their horses drinking gratefully, when Delilah stumbled on a loose stone. Vincent caught her instantly, his arms coming around her waist, pulling her against his chest. For a moment they stood frozen, her hands pressed to his shoulders, his face inches from hers. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms, could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather and man. "Delilah," he said, her name a question and a prayer all at once. She answered by rising up on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was everything she had imagined, and nothing she could have prepared for. Vincent's lips were warm and gentle at first, questioning, making sure this was truly what she wanted. When she made a soft sound of encouragement and wound her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened. His hands tightened on her waist, pulling her closer, and Delilah felt heat flood through her that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. She had been kissed before, chased pecks from boys back in Missouri, but this was different. This was a man who kissed her like she was precious and powerful all at once, like he was trying to pour every unspoken feeling into the press of his mouth against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it is fast, but I love you, Delilah Owens, and I needed you to know it." Tears pricked her eyes, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you refused to let me cry alone." Vincent kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. "Marry me," he said against her lips. "Be my wife. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life showing you how strong and beautiful and worthy you are." "Yes," Delilah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." They were wed 3 weeks later in the small chapel at Fort Bowie. Delilah wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace she had bartered from a merchant's wife. Vincent wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed for once, looking handsome enough to make her knees weak. The chaplain performed the ceremony, and a handful of soldiers and their families bore witness. When Vincent slipped a gold band onto her finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother, Delilah felt something settle deep in her soul. She was no longer alone. She was no longer defined by what Doctor Henshaw said she could not do. She was Vincent Irving's wife, and that was enough. Their wedding night was spent in the small cabin Vincent had built on the edge of the fort's property, a 2-room structure he had constructed with his own hands in preparation for bringing home his bride. He carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, and a bedroom beyond containing a wide bed covered in a colorful quilt. Vincent lit the lamps, bathing the room in warm, golden light. Then he turned to Delilah, suddenly looking uncertain in a way she had rarely seen from him. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that we do not have to do anything you are not ready for. I can sleep on the floor. We can take our time." Delilah's heart swelled with love for this man who had given her back her dreams. She crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "I am your wife," she said firmly, "and I want to be your wife in every way. I am not afraid anymore, Vincent, not with you beside me." He searched her face, looking for any hint of doubt or fear. Finding none, he smiled and cupped her cheek in his palm. "Then come to bed with me, wife," he said softly. "Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved." What followed was tender and passionate, awkward in moments as all first times are, but underlaid with such genuine care and affection that Delilah felt cherished down to her bones. Vincent was gentle and patient, making sure she felt nothing but pleasure, whispering words of love and praise against her skin, until she was breathless and clinging to him. When it was over and they lay tangled together beneath the quilt, Delilah felt whole in a way she had not since before her brother died. She had found her place in the world, and it was right here in Vincent Irving's arms. The months that followed were the happiest of Delilah's life. She settled into the rhythm of being Vincent's wife, managing their small household while he continued his work as a scout. She worried every time he left on a patrol, knowing the dangers that lurked in the vast Arizona wilderness. But he always came home to her, often bringing gifts. A book of poetry he had traded for in town, a soft blanket woven by an Apache woman, a comb made of polished horn. The other wives at the fort, women whose husbands were soldiers and officers, began to include Delilah in their social circles now that she was a married woman. She joined their sewing circles and helped organize dances and social events that broke up the monotony of frontier life. For the first time since her brother's death, Delilah had friends, a community, a sense of belonging. But beneath the happiness, there was still the question that Dr. Henshaw had planted in her mind. Could she have a child? Should she even try? Vincent never pressured her, never brought it up, but she knew he would make an incredible father. She saw it in the way he interacted with the children at the fort, tossing the boys into the air and making them shriek with laughter, listening patiently to the girls' endless stories about their dolls and imaginary adventures. He was made for fatherhood, and Delilah ached with the knowledge that her weakness might deny him that joy. It was nearly a year into their marriage when Delilah finally worked up the courage to broach the subject. They were sitting together after supper, Vincent carving a piece of wood by lamplight while Delilah mended one of his shirts. The domestic scene was so peaceful, so right, that it gave her the courage to speak. "Vincent," she said quietly, setting down her needle, "I want to talk about children." His hand stilled on the carving, and he looked up at her with those warm, amber eyes. "All right," he said carefully. "What about them?" Delilah twisted her hands in her lap, gathering her courage. "I see you with the children here at the fort. I see how much you love them. And I know that I am denying you something you want because of my weakness." "Delilah," Vincent began, but she held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I have been thinking about this for months. I want to be a mother, Vincent. I want to give you a child. And I know the risks. I know what Dr. Henshaw said, but I also know what you said to me that day by the palisade, that you would be strong enough for 3. I want to believe that. I want to try." Vincent set down his carving and crossed to where she sat. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his much larger ones. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I meant what I said, Delilah. I do not need a child to be happy. I have you, and that is more than I ever thought I would have. I will not risk losing you for something we can live without." "But I cannot live without trying," Delilah said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I cannot spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had only been brave enough to try. You gave me back my courage, Vincent. You made me believe I was strong. Now I need to prove it to myself if to no one else." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart, could hear the way his breathing had gone unsteady. "Then we will try," he said into her hair. "But at the first sign that anything is wrong, at the first indication that your health is failing, we stop. I will not lose you, Delilah. I cannot." She pulled back to look at him, seeing the fear and love warring in his expression. "You will not lose me," she promised. "I am stronger than Dr. Henshaw knows. I am stronger than I even knew before I met you." They tried, and in September of 1879, Delilah realized that her monthly courses had not come. At first she was afraid to hope, afraid to believe that it could really be happening. But when another month passed and then another, and when the nausea began in the mornings, she could no longer deny it. She was with child. She told Vincent one evening when he returned from a week-long patrol. He had barely stepped through the door when she threw herself into his arms, laughing and crying at once. "I am pregnant," she said against his chest. "Vincent, we are going to have a baby." He went very still, and for a moment Delilah feared he was not happy. But when he pulled back to look at her face, she saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. I am nearly 3 months along, I think." Vincent let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the small cabin. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "Delilah, we are going to have a child." "I know," she said, grinning despite the tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I am terrified and thrilled, and I cannot believe this is real." He set her down carefully as if she were made of glass and pressed a reverent kiss to her forehead. "How do you feel? Are you well? Should you be resting?" Delilah laughed at his sudden solicitude. "I feel fine. Sick in the mornings, but otherwise well. Vincent, you do not have to treat me like I am fragile. You are carrying our child," he said seriously. "I will treat you exactly as carefully as that requires." But his eyes were dancing with joy, and Delilah could not bring herself to argue. As her pregnancy progressed, Vincent was true to his word about being strong enough for 3. He took over all the heavy work around the cabin, refused to let her lift anything heavier than a dish, and hovered like an anxious mother hen. At first Delilah found it amusing, but as the months wore on and her belly swelled with new life, she came to appreciate his constant care. The truth was that pregnancy was harder on her body than she had anticipated. She was frequently exhausted, her appetite came and went unpredictably, and there were days when simply getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. But through it all, Vincent was there. He rubbed her swollen feet in the evenings. He held her hair when the morning sickness struck. He read to her when she was too tired to keep her eyes open herself. And he talked to her growing belly, telling their unborn child stories about the desert, about his childhood, about all the adventures they would have together once the baby arrived. "You are going to have the best mother in the world," Vincent would say, his hand spread across Delilah's stomach, feeling the baby kick. "She is strong and brave and beautiful, and she loves you more than anything. And your father is going to teach you how to ride and track and read the stars. We are going to be a family, little one. A real family." Delilah would lie there listening, her heart so full of love she thought it might burst. This was everything she had thought lost to her. This was the dream Dr. Henshaw had tried to steal. And she was living it, despite all the dire predictions. Of course, not everyone shared in their joy. Dr. Henshaw, when he learned of Delilah's pregnancy, was furious. He cornered Vincent outside the general store one afternoon and raked him over the coals for his irresponsibility. "You are killing her," the doctor hissed. "I told her she was too weak for childbearing, and you have gone and gotten her pregnant anyway. When she dies, it will be on your conscience." Vincent, who had been raised to respect his elders and professional men, nevertheless felt rage rise up in him like a living thing. "You told her she was too weak," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But you did not account for the fact that she would not be facing this alone. My wife is stronger than you know, doctor, and she has me standing beside her. We will prove you wrong." Dr. Henshaw shook his head, his expression a mixture of pity and contempt. "Stubbornness does not defeat biology, young man. I have seen dozens of women die in childbirth, women far stronger than your wife. You are playing a dangerous game." "Then I will play it gladly," Vincent said coldly, "because I believe in Delilah Owens Irving in a way you never have, and when she delivers our child safely, I expect an apology." He walked away before the doctor could respond, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He did not tell Delilah about the encounter, not wanting to worry her, but the doctor's words haunted him. What if he was wrong? What if his belief in Delilah's strength was not enough to overcome the physical realities of her weakened constitution? What if he lost her because he had been too selfish, too willing to take risks with her life? These fears plagued him through the final months of the pregnancy. As Delilah grew heavy with child, as her breathing became labored and her movements slower, Vincent's anxiety increased. He arranged for a midwife, an experienced woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies at Fort Bowie, to be present for the birth. He prepared the cabin meticulously, making sure they had clean linens and hot water and everything Mrs. Chen said they might need. And he prayed, though he was not a particularly religious man, praying to any god who might be listening that Delilah would survive. The baby came on a hot May evening, almost exactly a year after Dr. Henshaw had delivered his dire prognosis. Delilah's labor began just after supper, with pains that started mild but quickly intensified. Vincent sent for Mrs. Chen immediately and spent the next 12 hours in a state of barely controlled panic as Delilah labored to bring their child into the world. It was the longest night of Vincent's life. He stayed by Delilah's side, holding her hand, wiping the sweat from her face, offering whatever comfort he could as she endured wave after wave of pain. Mrs. Chen worked efficiently, checking Delilah's progress, offering encouragement, but Vincent could see the concern growing in the midwife's eyes as the hours dragged on, and the baby refused to come. "She is getting too tired," Mrs. Chen said quietly to Vincent during a brief lull in the contractions. "Her body is not strong enough to sustain this much longer. We may need to make some difficult choices." "No," Vincent said fiercely. "She is strong enough. I know she is. Give her more time." Mrs. Chen looked doubtful, but she nodded. "A little more time," she agreed. "But Mr. Irving, you need to understand that there may come a point where we have to choose between your wife and the child. If that moment comes—" "It will not," Vincent interrupted. "I will be strong enough for 3, remember. That is what I told her, and I meant it. They will both survive." "They have to." He returned to Delilah's side, taking her hand in his. She was pale and exhausted, her hair plastered to her face with sweat, but when she looked at him, he saw determination burning in her eyes. "I can do this," she whispered. "Vincent, I can do this." "I know you can," he said, bringing her hand to his lips. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You can do anything." Another contraction hit, and Delilah bore down with every ounce of strength she possessed. Vincent supported her, lending her his strength as he had promised, and suddenly Mrs. Chen was crying out in excitement. "The head! I can see the head! One more push, Mrs. Irving, just one more." Delilah screamed with effort, her hand crushing Vincent's, and then suddenly the cabin was filled with a new sound, the lusty wail of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Mrs. Chen announced, holding up the squalling infant. A healthy baby boy. Vincent felt tears streaming down his face as Mrs. Chen quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket. But his attention was all on Delilah, who had collapsed back against the pillows, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Delilah, love, are you all right?" Her eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak smile. "Let me see him," she whispered. Mrs. Chen placed the baby in Delilah's arms, and Vincent watched as his wife gazed down at their son with an expression of pure wonder. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with dark blue eyes, his tiny face scrunched up in concentration. "Hello, little one," Delilah murmured. "I am your mother. We have been waiting so long to meet you." Vincent reached out a tentative finger, and his son immediately grasped it with surprising strength. The touch sent a wave of emotion through him so powerful he thought his heart might stop. This was his child, his and Delilah's, living proof that love and strength could overcome even the direst predictions. "You did it," he said to Delilah, his voice choked with tears. "You proved Dr. Henshaw wrong. You were strong enough." "We were strong enough," Delilah corrected gently. "You and me and our son. Together." Mrs. Chen finished her work, ensuring that both mother and baby were healthy, and then discreetly left the new family alone. Vincent climbed carefully into bed beside Delilah, wrapping his arm around both her and the baby, and together they marveled at the new life they had created. "What should we name him?" Delilah asked, her head resting against Vincent's shoulder. Vincent thought for a moment, looking down at his son's perfect tiny face. "Thomas," he said finally, "after my father, Thomas Irving." "Thomas," Delilah repeated, testing the name. "Yes, I like it. Thomas Irving, you are going to have such an incredible life." Over the following weeks, Delilah recovered her strength more quickly than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Henshaw, when he finally examined her, was forced to admit that both mother and child were thriving. He never apologized as Vincent had demanded, but the vindication was sweet nonetheless. Vincent threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He doted on little Thomas, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with him at night when he fussed, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked to soothe the baby. Delilah would watch them together, her heart overflowing with love for both her boys, and think about how close she had come to never having this. How easily she might have believed Dr. Henshaw and resigned herself to a life without children. But Vincent had given her the courage to try, and in doing so had given her everything. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the Irving family flourished. Vincent continued his work as a scout, though he took fewer long-range patrols, preferring to stay close to home. Delilah expanded her sewing business, creating beautiful dresses for the officers' wives and selling them to earn extra money. Together, they saved every spare penny, dreaming of the day when they could buy land of their own and build a proper ranch. When Thomas was 2 years old, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, no hesitation. She knew what her body was capable of, knew that she and Vincent could face anything together. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, was born without complication in the spring of 1882. She had Delilah's dark hair and Vincent's amber eyes, and from the moment she entered the world, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "2 children," Vincent said one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching Thomas chase fireflies while Grace slept in Delilah's arms. "We have 2 healthy, beautiful children. Do you remember what Dr. Henshaw said? That you were too weak?" Delilah laughed softly, pressing a kiss to Grace's downy head. "I remember, but I also remember what you said, that you would be strong enough for 3. Turns out I needed to be strong enough for 4, Vincent said with a grin, leaning over to kiss her gently. "Good thing I have strength to spare when it comes to you." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The desert that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving now felt like home, the backdrop to a love story that had defied all odds. In 1884, Vincent's hard work and careful saving paid off. He and Delilah purchased 200 acres of land about 10 miles from Fort Bowie, near a reliable water source. They built a ranch house with their own hands, Vincent doing the heavy construction, while Delilah planned the layout and handled the finishing details. It was hard work, exhausting and sometimes frustrating, but they did it together, and when they finally moved their family into the completed house, the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. The Irving Ranch, as they called it, started small with just a few head of cattle and some chickens. But Vincent had learned ranching from his brothers back in Texas, and he knew how to make the land work for them. Within a few years, They had built up a respectable herd and were turning a profit. Thomas, now 7, was already learning to ride and help with the cattle. Grace, at 5, was more interested in helping her mother with the garden and the chickens, but she could sit a horse as well as any child twice her age. Life was not always easy. The Arizona desert could be brutal, with droughts that dried up water sources and sent cattle prices plummeting. There were occasional conflicts with Apache bands who resented the encroachment of white settlers on their traditional lands, though Vincent's respectful relationship with the native peoples usually kept the Irving ranch safe from trouble. And there were the usual hardships of frontier life: illness, injury, the constant struggle to make ends meet. But through it all, Vincent and Delilah faced every challenge together. They had built something real and lasting, not just in the physical structures of their ranch, but in the love and trust that bound their family together. Delilah often thought back to that terrible day in Dr. Henshaw's tent, when she had believed her life was over before it had truly begun. If someone had told her then that she would have a devoted husband, 2 healthy children, and a thriving ranch, she would never have believed them. But Vincent had believed. He had looked at her weakness and seen strength. He had heard the doctor's condemnation and offered hope instead. He had promised to be strong enough for 3, and he had kept that promise every single day of their marriage. In the summer of 1887, Delilah discovered she was pregnant for a 3rd time. She was 31 now, and this pregnancy was unplanned, but both she and Vincent were delighted. Thomas and Grace were excited about having a new sibling, already arguing about whether they wanted a brother or sister. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Delilah was older, her body more tired from years of ranch work and child-rearing. There were days when she felt every one of her 31 years, when simply getting out of bed seemed impossible. But Vincent was there, just as he had always been, taking over her chores, making sure she rested, reminding her constantly that she did not have to do everything alone. Their 3rd child, another son they named Daniel, was born in February of 1888. The birth was long and difficult, leaving Delilah exhausted, but both mother and baby came through it healthy. When Delilah held her newborn son for the first time, with Vincent beside her and Thomas and Grace peering curiously at their new brother, she felt her heart might burst with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent, who was gazing at their family with an expression of awed wonder. "Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself." Vincent looked at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You have it backwards, love. Thank you for letting me be part of this. Thank you for being brave enough to try, even when you were terrified. Thank you for making me the luckiest man alive." He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that held years of love and partnership and unshakable faith. Around them, their children made sounds of disgust at the display of affection, but neither Vincent nor Delilah paid any attention. They had built this life together, brick by brick, through determination and love and the simple belief that together they could overcome anything. The years that followed were full and rich. The Irving ranch continued to grow and prosper. Thomas developed into a fine young man, taking on more and more responsibility for the cattle operation. Grace proved to have a gift with horses, training them with a patience and intuition that amazed everyone who saw her work. And young Daniel was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. Vincent and Delilah grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. There were gray threads in Vincent's dark hair now, lines around Delilah's eyes from squinting into the desert sun. But when Vincent looked at his wife, he still saw the beautiful, brave woman who had agreed to build a life with him. And when Delilah looked at Vincent, she still saw the man who had given her back her dreams. One evening in the late spring of 1895, Vincent and Delilah sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset. Thomas was 17 now, nearly a man, courting a girl from a neighboring ranch. Grace was 13, all long legs and determined independence. Daniel was 7, playing in the yard with a puppy they had recently acquired. "Do you ever think about that day?" Delilah asked quietly, her hand in Vincent's. "The day Dr. Henshaw told me I was too weak to be a mother." Vincent squeezed her hand gently. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Usually when I am watching our children and feeling grateful that you were brave enough not to believe him." Delilah smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I would not have been brave enough without you. You gave me the courage to try." "We gave each other courage," Vincent corrected. "That is what love does, Delilah. It makes us braver than we could ever be alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their youngest son play, listening to the sounds of their ranch settling in for the night. The cattle lowing in the distance, the chickens murmuring in their coop, the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees Vincent had planted when they first bought the land. These were the sounds of home, of family, of a life well lived. "I love you," Delilah said softly. "I have loved you from the moment you refused to let me cry alone. I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Vincent replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You are the strongest person I have ever known, Delilah Irving. You proved everyone wrong. You proved that love and determination can overcome any obstacle." "We proved it," Delilah corrected. "Together." "Together," Vincent agreed. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Vincent and Delilah remained on the porch, hands intertwined, hearts full. They had built a life that once seemed impossible, created a family from hope and faith and unwavering love. Dr. Henshaw had told Delilah she was too weak to be a mother, but Vincent had promised to be strong enough for 3. In the end, they had been strong enough for so much more. They had been strong enough to believe in each other when belief seemed foolish. They had been strong enough to face their fears and try anyway. They had been strong enough to build something lasting and true. And they would continue to be strong enough for each other and for their children, for as long as their hearts beat beneath the vast Arizona sky. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and creosote, familiar and beloved, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Life on the frontier was hard, but it was also beautiful, and the Irving family had learned to thrive in it. 3 children running through the ranch house, filling it with laughter and life. A husband and wife who had defied the odds and proven that love truly could conquer all. Delilah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of Vincent beside her, hearing Daniel's happy shouts as he played. This was everything she had thought lost to her on that terrible day in Dr. Henshaw's tent. This was the life Vincent had promised her when he said he would be strong enough for 3. And it was more, so much more than either of them could have imagined. It was perfect and real and theirs, earned through courage and strengthened by love. The future stretched before them, full of possibility, and Vincent and Delilah Irving would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, unafraid, strong enough for whatever came next.